was probably likely that Trudeau was a target. It's used to trade to try to bully us. It's taken Canadians hostage. It's executed Canadians. It continually harasses communities here. Of course we should be worried, and the reason we should be worried is because we haven't seen anything done.
Dennis, hi. Welcome to Can't Be Censored. We appreciate you being here. You wrote a book recently. It's called Under Assault, and it's about Chinese foreign interference. So let's just level set. What is foreign interference, and why did you want to focus on China?
Well, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. Really, we're talking about trying to covertly, a foreign state trying to covertly influence a target. So it could be, and if we're talking about a target country like Canada, then we're talking about trying to covertly influence people, academics, politicians, business elites, basically to try to get something, right? So something that the state is interested in, maybe to further the state's own interests. So that might be passing a policy, or don't comment or don't say anything about something that is sensitive to them, and trying to get what it wants. And the key there is it's covert.
So historically, how much of a target has Canada been for China, and how much of it is it one now?
Canada is a big target of China. And as CSIS report after report has demonstrated every year, it's the #1 foreign state threat to this country.
And is it mainly because of our proximity to the U.S. and they find that it's U.S. less impervious to them, or like why?
Part of it is, okay, you're close to the U.S. and maybe place can be used to kind of send people into the U.S. Soviets used to do this kind of stuff. Russians still do, I think. But more so also because, Canada's an industrialized nation. It's an advanced nation. It's a member of NATO. It's a member of the Five Eyes. So part of all those alliances make Canada a high-profile target for information. It's also, because it's an advanced country, technologically, industrial, there's IP that can be stolen.
Do you think there is enough of a conversation going on right now in this country about foreign interference, foreign influence?
No, not at all. I think that really it's been sidelined. It's been sidelined in favor of political interests in terms of Canada trying to align itself more closely to China because of U.S. tariffs. And frankly, if I can be blunt, it's a stupid thing to do.
Yeah,
we're talking about a country that has continually tried to pressure Canada to go along with its policies. It's used trade to try to bully us repeatedly. It's taken Canadians hostage on more than one occasion, not just the Michaels, but the Garretts. It's executed Canadians in China. It continually harasses communities here, bullies them, threatens them, and steals IP and technology from us.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those tactics. When you talk about influence and interference, you talk about politicians, and you say that Pierre Trudeau was probably the first politician that was the target.
Really, it's grounded in archival documents I got from Library and Archives Canada and that I got from CSIS,
right,
that were released through access to information requests. And I got a lot, and there's quite a bit that's still redacted. But generally, that led me to believe that it was probably likely that Trudeau was a target. And not even just Trudeau, but also just Canada in general, to recognize the PRC. But what was different with Canada was when it came to Taiwan. So with the recognition that ended up happening, you ended up having there. So what I saw in the archival documents is there were reporters that were trying to warn the government, saying that, is this character Paul Lynn, who's an academic in McGill, is he an intermediary for the government? Because it seems like he's got some kind of role in meeting with PRC officials and maybe he's trying to influence the government. You've got reporters from the time period saying that, this guy, is he an intermediary? You've got the opposition in the House accusing this of happening. So all this smoke is swirling around this guy, Paul Lynn, this academic. And for years, there's always been rumors that maybe he was, working for the PRC or not. There's nothing clear. But the documents that I got, the old RCMP files, flat out state they believed him to be an agent of influence for the PRC. And why that becomes important is because he was going around at the time heavily advocating for the recognition of China. Mm-hmm. He was being courted by a government to write policy papers on it. He was touring Europe. He later goes on to the United States. He claims that he was influential in the role of having Nixon first go to China. Mm-hmm. So, and what happens? Basically, so that says to me, and the RCMP even admit at one point in the documents, that he is working for not only for the CCP, the Communist Party of China, but he's also tasked with trying to get people to accept China, recognize China. And that becomes important because what happens when Canada recognizes China, it also isolates Taiwan and it recognizes the one China policy.
Right.
And that's carried forward by the Americans. It's carried forward by countries after. And it's what China uses right now to justify its claims on Taiwan.
So where does Trudeau come into this story and what is his relationship with Lin?
So Trudeau comes into the story because he first goes to China early, before he becomes PM. And he gets this curated tour of the country. He talks about it in his book, Two Innocents in China. And the first thing that struck out to me is, why is he getting this tour? Why is the PRC pulling out all these stops for this guy, giving him this highly selective guided tour, complete with even his own books on their library shelves? Now, you're not doing that. Coming from, with an intelligence mindset that I've got in the background, you're not doing that unless you want this person, really, you're trying to influence this person.
Yeah.
Right. So, but after that, then you've got Trudeau's government seeking out Paul Lin in 1968 to write policy papers. How do they know who Paul Lin is? Paul Lin's just an academic in McGill. How does the government know to go to this guy and ask him for his stance on China and all his interests, right? So the other connection, so they both claim they didn't know each other before the early 1970s. And then there's a Swedish journalist. And why Swedish? Because the talks to recognition were taking place in Sweden, saying that Paul Lin approached him to get a visa to secretly try to enter the country when he was in Austria. And this reporter also believed that there's a connection here with Trudeau. And I didn't go on to say why. So that's where I say, my theory is that there was an attempt to influence Trudeau. How it played out, I don't have all the documents unredacted because there's a lot that is redacted.
So there's still a lot more there.
Oh yeah, they gave me hundreds, and there's still even more thousands on order. But it's all right now black.
You tell the story of the researchers in Winnipeg.
Here's a perfect illustration of how all this stuff can play out. Where you have these two researchers in the Winnipeg lab, and husband and wife team, and she is secretly, constantly applying for talent plan applications. Now, talent plan applications, these were, China's changed the name since, but what they were is essentially, they'll give you like 200 grand. You come to China for a few months, very minimal commitment, fund your research. So it was easy money. But the catch is that the intellectual property that's produced through your research, they get access to, right? So, but it's a way to get funds. So the one researcher is continually applying, secretly applying for these plans while working in a Canadian top secret laboratory, sending Ebola virus samples to China for a new Wuhan lab. That is their new lab that's structured. Husband is allowing researchers from China, some of whom had connections to People's Liberation Army people, freely roam the hallways, log into a computer for them. And then in the end, she actually ends up getting approved to work on a project in the Wuhan lab with another researcher who was it's called gain of function research. was so this other researcher was essentially artificially evolving viruses in a lab. The purpose of that kind of research is to develop a vaccine early. Problem when you do that stuff, though, is it's very dangerous.
Sure.
You are artificially evolving a virus to infect people. So the Canadian researcher ends up working with her, but also gets approved to work with her on a project that resembles gain-of-function research. We don't know if it was carried out, but COVID broke out just a few months later in Wuhan.
How concerned should we be about elections?
I definitely would say, of course, we should be worried. And the reason we should be worried is because we haven't seen anything done to actually counter this.
So has that been different with different parties in power, or is that a consistent theme across parties?
After Chrétien on, even Harper's government comes in relatively tough position on China, but then pulls back in the later years. And so I really haven't seen much in the way of tougher stance.
You think that is just pure economic reasons?
Yeah, I think so. Governments tended to view China as they wanted to view it, believe it as they wanted to believe it. And when you do that, it basically creates this situation where no matter what kind of intelligence or information you're presented with, it won't dislodge that view.
China isn't the only country that wants to influence, right? So there's, you got like, we're seeing more India, we're seeing more Russia, and God knows all the other countries that want to come in here. So are you going to look into any of those other ones, or do you think China's like the biggest main actor that we should be worried about?
Well, I mean, repeatedly we're told by the government, and we have been for the I don't know how many years now, that China's the biggest one.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what led to a kind of a natural look into China, because there's just so much about it.
Yeah.
Take India. Look at all the stuff that happened with India in the last few years and how aggressive the government was in targeting India.
Sure.
And we have pretty well crickets when it comes to targeting China in the same way.
Let's talk about, you mentioned this very briefly, the two Michaels and the Huawei executive, that whole situation, and what kind of really that brought to light.
You know, the unjustified and brutal detention of the Michaels, that to me brought to light just how naive and ignorant Canada was about China. Because, and for a brief moment, I think it kind of shone a light on what the PRC can actually be like. But then, after their release and now with the change in government, it seems to have all gone away again,
fast, right?
But the reason I say because Canada should have known, because they detained the Garretts for a very similar situation back in 2014. So you knew that hostage diplomacy was something they engaged in. And yet when Trudeau Jr. came into office, it was very much with a open arms kind of pro-PRC policy.
Yeah. So what does, if it's not completely severing all economic ties, what does pushing back look like?
Pushing back, yeah, and that's key to point out. It's not to say you cut all economic ties with China, but it's also being realistic about where those economic ties are. People seem to have very idealized views of China that somehow, by partnering more with China on trade, it's going to somehow level things out with the Americans or what have you. But the differences between number one and number two is almost $1 trillion. So there's a big gap, first of all. Sure. So besides that, it's not to say that you're cutting off trade or relations with China. What it looks like is having a foreign agent registry. What it looks like is actually utilizing those new foreign interference laws that were created with Bill C-70, along with the registry, and actually prosecuting somebody who's engaged in the activity. Those are very, one would think, straightforward simple ways to demonstrate that we can have trade relations with you, but we will not tolerate being bullied by you or having you engage in these activities in Canada.
Yeah.
And one of those activities that you talk about is the intimidation of Chinese Canadians here. Talk to us a bit about what that looks like and how to deal with that.
That is brutal,
Yeah.
first of all. I mean, to hear from people who have been targeted this way repeatedly was really crushing.
So what happens? Like, how does it shake out?
Online. So they'd get bombarded with threats to their physical safety, death threats, rape threats, repeated. Some would get sent ISIS beheading videos and told that this is going to happen to you if you keep talking.
Yeah.
There's people who, you know, they knew when someone would send them a message knowing that their daughter was going to be home while they were on vacation. Others were followed by cars. Others were, you know, they get calls from family members back home saying don't engage in this kind of stuff anymore, and they knew that the family member was under duress. And so some have basically had a pledge now for life to not speak to family anymore, completely cut them off of their life, because they know if they don't do that, they're going to be used as leverage.
Mm-hmm.
So to have these, you know, fellow Canadians facing this every single day and have their government basically be completely quiet about it, to imagine yourself in that kind of a state is horrible.
So and I think Carmen asked this earlier, is the United States doing a much better job than we are?
They suffer in some ways from similar pitfalls as us in terms of, you know, seeking out more business relationships, sometimes not playing, you know, enough focus on security and what have you, but nowhere near. I mean, sometimes the grass can always be greener. They might, you know, say, oh, you know, in other countries, I don't think anybody would say Canada's doing enough, but yeah, they have a type of foreign agent registry. They've had one since the 1930s. I mean, they regularly have been targeting people who have not been declaring their ties to foreign governments and prosecuting them publicly, repeatedly. The FBI has been doing this. So they've been taking a lot harder stand on this than Canada has. Absolutely.
Under the current leader in China, Xi Jinping, it seems like things are really aggressive. It's more global. It's not just Canada. It's everywhere. But it also seems as though this sort of influence is entrenched. Not, you know, it's not just him. It's goes well beyond him. So even if he leaves eventually, what does that look like? Does anything change? Does it become worse, better, or the same?
I think if he left, you might see a little bit of a détente, perhaps. Maybe you'd see a little bit of a lift in terms of the aggressiveness of it. Will it completely go? No, because United Front work is actually baked into the PRC's constitution. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So in terms of, you know, the UFWD and those types of activities, no, because they preceded Xi Jinping. Well, by many, many years. I mean, his father, I believe, was active in it at one point. So it's not going anywhere. I just think maybe the aggressiveness might get toned down a little bit. But certainly it's not going to go anywhere if as a country you don't protect yourself from it. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the old saying that de Gaulle got from the British, which was, you know, there's no such thing. States don't have friends, they have interests, right? And Canada has its own, and it should be protecting those. And it should be most certainly protecting it domestically.
So we talked about politicians, we talked about business leaders, academics. What about technology? What role does technology play in all of this? And has that kind of supercharged China's ability to interfere?
Yeah, I believe it was a former NSA director who had characterized China's theft of technology and IP as the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. It's allowed them to get to places technologically that would have taken them, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars and decades to do. They came to almost essentially technological parity with the United States when it came to nuclear weapons back in the 90s because of theft. In terms of fighter aircraft, in terms of transport aircraft, they saved billions upon billions of dollars in R&D by stealing it. So it's helped them tremendously, and they still do it. I mean, and this is the problem, is that we don't have, if you're not taking enough measures to target them in terms of and build your own defenses, they'll continue to do it.
You talked to us about a story about Nortel.
Yeah.
Folks that are of my age probably remember Nortel. The folks of this generation probably don't. But tell us a little bit about that.
Nortel. That was heartbreaking to research that, to talk to people involved in that, because, I knew of Nortel obviously as well.
Yeah.
But to hear the frustration that people had in trying to fight what was happening, and we'll get into what's happening. So Nortel was, a homegrown Canadian technological giant.
Yeah.
Is expanding across countries, leading in all kinds of IP that later have gone on to help create 5G and all kinds of other, innovations we use now. And within about 10 years, they're filing for bankruptcy. And there's been a lot written about them. And a lot of the standard stuff about poor management and practices, sure, applies. I'm sure of that. But what didn't get a lot of attention, surprisingly, was the fact that they were hacked to the bone. So the security IT people, I talked to them in the book, and just telling me how they were just frustrated to no end to try to stop relentless hacking that's taking place. Their CEO's computers are getting hacked. IP is just flying out the door. And you think about that today, to imagine like a technological giant just losing all its IP, it's devastating.
So why don't you think that there's more of a push from the business community in Canada than for kind of more of a push from the government on this in terms of protecting Canadian businesses as well?
Because I think, again, there's a little bit of that. I see this especially when I look at efforts to get closer to China and not rock the boat, so to speak. I see that also coming. It's there's almost a generational thing here.
Yeah.
Where you see people who were around in the 90s and had, those kind of blinders on.
Sure.
When it comes to China, or the early 2000s, being the biggest pushers of this kind of stuff. And the idea that, but from what I heard from some business leaders is that any people who from the West who go to try to make money in China don't make money in China.
Yeah.
They just get their IP stolen and out the door.
Right.
But don't you think sometimes there's a bit of political correctness too in how we talk about this issue?
Sure.
Right? It's like, if I accuse a person who is from China, doesn't speak English that well, or I suspect them, I'm a racist.
I think if your target is the state,
Sure.
right?
There's a difference.
There's a
between
difference,
the
But
right?
there are
The
people
party.
who will hide behind that too.
Oh, absolutely, and they know that.
Right.
They absolutely know that, and they use that.
Yeah.
Repeatedly. I mean, we see it from in different countries, New Zealand, Australia. They've documented how United Front groups would hide behind accusations of racism to continue doing what they're doing. But that's why something like I would say that again, like something like a foreign agent registry is, some people may try to criticize that, but it's pretty straightforward. It's like if you're working for a foreign state, regardless of which one it is, just declare it. Our intelligence, the West's intelligence communities, were not set up to fight this kind of stuff. They're set up in the Cold War to fight Russian spies who were operating intelligence officers and what have you. It wasn't set up to target, the kind of mass influence attempts that the PRC engages in.
And so there needs to be kind of a mindset shift in terms of how to actually go about attacking this, because it is not as clear cut
but
as
even
like
the intelligence gathering has to be different, and like the tactics are different, and right, like everything's changed.
Yeah, a lot has to change. Just because it's again, we weren't set up to deal with this kind of stuff.
It is a lot more challenging in a way.
100%.
Yeah.
Way more challenging, because you can't mass target people either. Otherwise, then you are now verging on racism here if you're just going to target people from a certain group.
Okay, so then how do you? I mean, I guess maybe you don't have this answer, but how do you then do that?
Yeah, I don't have that answer. I mean, that's not that's something that has to be figured out. But we have to get moving on doing it.
We do a segment at the very end called a rapid fire, uncensored rapid fire, and it's meant to be a little lighter and quicker.
Sure.
So we're gonna, even though this is a serious topic, I think we can have a little bit of fun.
Sure.
Okay, TikTok, ban or keep?
Ban.
Why?
It's just a data mining operation for the PRC.
Is it really?
Get off.
That's my
What are you
view.
talking about? She has it. I don't. I don't. We have a TikTok.
Look, the more data you collect, the better for your state.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Which country out there is a model right now for countering foreign interference and influence?
I know you said rapid fire, but you know what? The closest one I would have to say is still the United States. It's not the best one,
right?
But they bring up charges and they publicize it more.
Is there a film or TV show that gets foreign interference right? You watch it and you're like, oh, that's pretty good.
Not foreign interference, but maybe the spy world, the Americans.
Okay, so on this subject, what do you think Canada's biggest vulnerability is right now?
Going back to China with a similar view, expecting a different result.
If you were made the CSIS director for the next 24 hours, you don't have to go through committee, anything like that, what's the first policy or operation you would greenlight?
I think I would target foreign influence or foreign interference actors, and I think I would declassify a bunch of stuff too.
Are we funding counterintelligence robustly enough in this country?
No, I don't think so.
Is there anything that gives you hope that Canada can still get this right?
Yeah, it's people. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's the people that hold everybody accountable. And so the more that people get attuned to the issue, the more that people care about the issue, the more they'll start demanding more from their governments, the more they'll start, doing more to protect their own fellow Canadians. That's the most important thing.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
If you like this episode and want to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you again next time.